Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh and welcome to an all new pair of Ace in a Day gameplays for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode I shall be reviewing the P-40F-10 Warhawk, a Tier 2 battle rating 2.3 American fighter. As always, starting with the plane's history, which today covers the F variant of the Curtiss P-40, we begin thus. Following the introduction of the E variant of the P-40 to combat service in early 1942, Curtiss would spend the next 3 years working on improving the capabilities of the P-40. This led to a large number of successor variants, starting with the F, or in Curtiss's own design designation, the H-87D. Developed by the summer of 1942, the F incorporated only one major change compared to the E, the replacement of the Allison V17-1039 liquid-cooled V12 1150 horsepower engine with a rolls-royce Merlin 20 liquid-cooled V12 1300 horsepower engine as a license built by Packard under the designation of V1650-1. The intention of the engine switch was to improve the high altitude performance of the P-40, since the Allison engine was known to lose performance above 4,572 metres altitude, or 15,000 feet, whereas the Merlin engine started to lose performance above 5,791 metres altitude, or 19,000 feet. To accommodate this change, the carburettor scoop on top of the plane's nose was removed as this was required for the Allison engine only. The F variant entered production by the end of the summer of 1942, with the first aircraft rolling off the assembly lines and into service by the end of autumn 1942. The P-40F, as it was designated by the United States Army Air Force, the USAAF, would see service in the hands of multiple air forces between late 1942 and mid-1944, including but not limited to the USAAF, particularly in both the Pacific and China-Burma-India theatres, British Royal Air Force and Commonwealth Air Forces under the designation of Kitty Hawk Mark II, seeing service primarily in the North African theatre, and the Free French Air Force in both the North African and Mediterranean theatres. Over 1,300 P-40Fs were produced, with a design seeing its fuselage being made 0.6 metres or 2 foot longer during its production run to improve directional stability. 230 of these aircraft were exported to the British Royal Air Force under Lend-Lease. The F variant was to be immediately succeeded on the production lines by the start of 1943 by the L variant, which was focused on improving the plane's top speed by reducing the plane's overall mass. This involved removing unnecessary equipment from the aircraft, including 2 of the 6 wing-mounted 12.7mm M2 Browning machine guns. In practice, this only led to a top speed increase of 4 miles per hour, or 6.4 kilometers an hour. A total of 700 L variant aircraft were produced, entering service by February of 1943. With the same belligerents as mentioned previously. It should be noted that the 100 P-40Ls provided to the British Royal Air Force under Lend-Lease were also designated as Kitty Hawk Mark IIs. This led to the original 230 P-40F aircraft exported being redesignated as Kitty Hawk Mark IIAs. The F and L variants would be succeeded by the definitive N variant by the summer of 1943. For reference, the -10 designation of the plane we are flying today denotes that it belongs to the 10th production block of the P-40F variant. If you compare the in-game model with that of the P-40E-1, you will note that the fuselage of the P-40F-10 is slightly longer than that of the P-40E-1, representing the lengthening of the plane's fuselage by 0.6 metres. As a result, it is possible that the 10th production block of the P-40F was one of the first to experience this lengthening of the fuselage. And so, while historical overview concluded, let us take a look at how the P-40F-10 Warhawk handles in the skies of War Thunder Arcade. For our first gameplay of today, we are on the ground strike map Paradise Island using the following setup. Stealth belts for our machine guns, the reasoning being in my experience, these belts have delivered the most consistent and damaging results over time compared to the other belts. For our convergence, as our machine guns are wing mounted, we are using the 600 metre setting. Again, I found this setting to be the most reliable and seems to work well, whether it be at closer ranges going down to 400 metres all the way out to extended ranges of 1.2 kilometres. Albeit if you're in the midst of a turn fight and your foes within say 300 metres and closing, you may want to aim off centre in order to ensure that one set of machine guns, so in one wing, is able to hit the target cleanly and do maximum damage. As for our fuel load, we are taking the standard 30-minute fuel load to ensure we can make it to the end of the game unscathed on fuel capacity. We begin our analysis as always by talking about the aircraft's climb rate. In the case of the P-40F-10, the climb rate of this aircraft is nothing special. It's average for its battle rating, meaning it's got the ability to get to a good amount of altitude in the early stages of the game and regain altitude over time, but it's not going to be out-climbing in the long term the likes of the Ki-44 or the Spitfire Mk.Vb at its battle rating, and then when you look to higher battle ratings, such as the Messerschmitt 109 ML3, you'll find yourself falling well behind the likes of those aircraft. But you do have good sustainability, and if you use a climb angle at 22.5 degrees, you can continue to climb with this plane, web cycling as I typically do, all the way up to 4,500 metres before you need to level out and build up your speed and go again. As we head out to the side here, we're doing this because we're right in the middle of a thick cloud layer, and we do not want to bump into an enemy fighter or interceptor head to head with a short distance between us, or alternatively get bounced from above or below. So instead, by heading out, we're going to build up a little bit more altitude and then make our way over to try and attack one of the aggressors up on high, because there are a number around. We're seeing the black dots off in the distance. Now we are going to be bumping into a Mk.Vb very shortly, and we're going into a turn fight with them. And one key thing to keep an eye on during this turn fight is the fact that I'm going to have to fight against the nature of this aircraft. And that is that whilst it has an average turn circle, slightly behind the likes of the MS-410 and equal to a Yak-1, but well behind the likes of say a Spitfire Mk.1A, the difficulty you're going to have is that the rudder of this plane is highly unstable unless you engage in a turn above 450 km an hour. And what this means is every time you make a manoeuvre, the rudder is going to wobble significantly, and this will cost you both time and energy, and means that you can fall behind a good number of opponents. Now the Mk.Vb I'm going up against has a much wider turn circle, which means I can afford to have to deal with the rudder. I'm not going to be putting myself at an extreme disadvantage. However, this was an engagement against the likes of, say, an MS-410, it would be much more equal, and in fact it would quickly go into the favour of the MS-410, I would argue, because they do not have to contend with the rudder wobble compared to the P-40F-10. But nonetheless, focusing on what we're seeing right now, we're gradually coming around on the 6 of our opponent. Keep disengaging through the cloud layer, it's very difficult to get a bead on them, but we're finally getting close enough to keep them within our sights. And as we can see, once you get rid of the rudder wobble, the P-40F-10 handles very nicely, and it's a very clean flying aircraft. But every time we go to make an exaggerated manoeuvre, you can see that rudder wobbling side to side, and it means that we just have to put that extra bit of fight into the plane in order to get a shot on target or be able to follow our foe. Now, without considering the rudder wobble, what you'll notice is that the rudder turn circle of this plane is very tight. In fact, it's able to rival the likes of, say, a Ki-61 Mark I Co at the same battle rating, and that gives this plane the uncanny ability to very quickly snap around on the rudder once you get past that wobble. Outside that control surface, what you'll find is that the roll rate of this plane is great, and its elevator is good, giving it a tight loop circle, albeit you'll need to start a loop at a speed of in excess of 300 km an hour, otherwise you're going to stall mid-loop. Now when you go to higher and higher speeds, you'll find that the control surfaces start to react rather awkwardly, in that both your roll rate and your rudder suffer once you start going above similar thresholds. In the case of the roll rate, at 550 km an hour, you'll find that it starts to drop off, and by 725 km an hour, it will have been reduced by 75%. Whereas with your rudder, you'll find that between 500 and 700 km an hour, you'll drop off in performance by 75%, making this plane very difficult to use in a high-speed boom and zoom dive. As you can see here, we're going into a dive to look at multiple foes. We're not going to be using boom and zoom to attack them apart from this Yak-4, who's going to be a much easier foe to track as they're a bomber and have less manoeuvrability, albeit they do go for the head-to-head and we take them out. But now we're going to surge upwards with 3 foes all looking up towards us, a P-38, a Spitfire and also a VG-33C1, and we're going to cause them all to stall out in our way, and we're going to bring them all down here. Now as we come over the top here using a loop, we're looking at the VG-33C1, who hasn't quite got enough energy to be able to use their 20mm cannon effectively to hit us, only scratching our underside with their machine guns. We come down the P-38E and finally snap around on the Spitfire to pick up the triple kill. With all 3 foes out of the sky, and you'll see here that I don't realise the VG-33C1 is actually dead until I look at the feed shortly after, we're now going to look towards the Su-2 off in the distance attacking our ground units. And what this means is, coming back to the high-speed control surfaces, that because you lack the roll rate and the rudder to follow foes when you go above 725 km an hour, you're going to be flying like a bullet in a boom and zoom dive at such a speed, and in turn you're going to need to look for foes who are not spatially aware of your presence, or alternatively you're going to have to try and linearise the boom and zoom engagement. The third alternative, of course, is you make it a short distance one. But then the difficulty with that is you're actually going to be compliant with the average vertical energy retention of this plane, which means, unlike what you saw against the 3 aircraft there, the Spitfire, the P-38 and the VG-33C1 were able to stall them all out, sometimes foes can use your vertical energy retention's average nature against you in order to be able to follow you up when you return up into the skies following your boom and zoom attack. Breaking off here, having picked up our 6th and final kill of this gameplay, the only other thing to note in terms of high speed capability is that the elevator will retain 50% of its controllability, dropping off between 700 and 850 km an hour, which is not too much of an issue as such because you're being impacted more heavily by the poor roll rate and the poor rudder controllability when you're going into those high speed dives. So you can see already that control surfaces are leaning themselves quite heavily towards those medium speed turn fights, but you still have to contend with the rudder wobble when you go into those turn fights, so really you're being punished at both ends of the spectrum, whether it be the high speed engagement or the low to medium speed engagement. We're making our way over towards the centre of the map now, and we can see that the P-40F-10 has sensible pace, and it's able to get across the battlefield to a good degree, albeit that Paradise Island is one of the larger maps, that's why it's taken so long for us to get into the next engagement. In terms of straight line acceleration, you'll find that this plane accelerates from its stall speed, an average one of 125 km an hour, up to 375 km an hour on engine power alone at a decent rate, and with war emergency power this becomes much faster, getting up to 475 km an hour before you experience a gradual drop off. On top of that, what you have to consider is when you go into a dive, your dive speed acceleration is rather nice. It's nothing phenomenal, but it's good enough all the way up to 700 km an hour. Then there's a gradual drop off which becomes steeper at 800 km an hour, with your maximum dive speed being 898 km an hour. So you can use dives to good effect to both escape and chase down foes, but be aware you're not the best in that regard, and playing such the P-40F-10 Thunderbolt at a higher battle rating will chase you down. As this game comes to its end, time to take a look at the post-game stats. With our 6 kills, we're able to pick up 19,096 silver lions and 1,748 research points. From this first gameplay alone, whilst perhaps not made explicit until now, we will have seen one underlying theme of the P-40F-10, and that is its jack-of-all-trades nature. Recall how we're able to switch between a number of roles over the course of the match, whether it be turn fighting against the Mk.Vb, alternatively boom and zoom against that Yak-4, and then again against the Su-2, or trying to stall out multiple foes at once, the VG-33, the Spitfire Mk.2 and the P-38. This means that you have to adapt to situations on the fly or choose how a situation is going to play out in the P-40F-10 based on its characteristics and your knowledge of the foes you're going to be going up against. And it means there's no one way of flying this aircraft. And you're going to see that again in the second gameplay coming up very shortly, in that as the situations develop and the gameplay plays out, you need to choose how you want to employ the aircraft, but you never have to feel as though you're constrained into a particular role unless you set it up specifically for ground attack, taking bombs and the ground attack belts on the machine guns, or those which are orientated towards taking out ground targets as such. Another thing to consider as well is, this jack-of-all-trades nature is echoed from the P-40E-1 Kitty Hawk, and that was something that was an overall theme of that aircraft. It was just finding the ability to be able to do most things to a decent degree. Well, as we go into the second gameplay, one thing I will be talking about towards the end of it is how this plane compares with its predecessor. But enough talking, let's get into it. For our second and final gameplay of today, we're on the ground strike map Cliff Coast using the same setup as before. This time as we go for our initial climb, we're going to come onto the concept of altitude thresholds, as this is one of the strengths of the P-40F-10. In that for her battle rating, she is not going to experience any considerable drop-offs in performance within the typical engagement altitude range of say ground level all the way up to 3,500 or 4,000 metres, with our ideal altitude range in my opinion being between 1,500 and 4,000 metres altitude, because this offers you the best of most worlds and caters to the jack-of-all-trades nature of the aircraft, in that you'll have some altitude if you start the engagement at 1,500 metres to dive away using the overall pace of this plane in a dive to pull distance from a foe or chase them down if they try to dive away from you. You can conduct boom and zoom within this altitude range, you can go into your standard turn fights, you can intercept enemy bombers, you can go head to head with aggressors that are coming towards you, as we're going to do so against the MS-405C1, etc. It gives you that overall flexibility to deploy the aircraft. Flying all the way down to ground level, you're not going to experience any changes, but you take away that altitude to give you the ability to escape from an engagement if you feel as though the situation's getting too much to handle. As we go head to head with the MS-405C1, we'll see here that whilst they have the nose mounted 20mm cannon, we're able to use our 50 cal successfully to bring them down well before they get within a kilometre of us. And as a result of that, we can now break away with the Yak-1 coming towards us, again another 20mm cannon plane, mounted in the nose, the singular cannon and the machine guns on top, and we're going to pull some distance, bring them towards friendly territory and then come around for the head-to-head, alternatively the extended turn fight. But they've already decided to dive away and go after our A-35B, and with the enemy bombers up on high, the B-34 and SM-79 right behind them, we're going to chase those guys down and also bring down this Buffalo if it tries to get in our way or just strays too close to us. As we're making our way across these targets, let's talk about the maximum altitude limits, in that this plane has an engine maximum of 4,500 meters, at which point you'll experience a gradual drop off in acceleration in a straight line, and this increases considerably above 6,000 meters. As for your control surfaces, your maximum limit is 5,500 meters, at which point an extra heaviness is added to your elevator, which will cause your nose to dip in turns. On top of that, your rudder wobble worsens considerably, and you'll need to start a turn at 525 km an hour or more in order to avoid the rudder wobbling, and that makes life turn fighting at such an altitude very difficult in this plane. But because engagements do not normally occur this high, that means again the P-40F-10 is going to feel very comfortable within your typical altitudes. And it means that you're never really going to experience these maximum limits of altitude unless you're hunting down a bomber that's been able to stray extremely high up in the sky. But as we can see here, we're only at 3,800 meters altitude right now to chase down the B-34, so it's not as though we're starting to hit our limits anytime soon. And even if we start to hit the 4,500 meter altitude limit of the gradual acceleration drop off, it's not too prominent compared to what it actually is when you get to 6,000 meters, giving you that ability to chase down the bombers that you're going to see. So you can feel comfortable in being that bomber interceptor for a good period of time in the game, if not for a whole game if the enemy team decides to prioritise sending out bombers in straight lines up high in the sky. I'm going to bring down the B-34 at long distance here, and you're going to see the fact that whilst we have the 6 machine guns, we also have ample ammunition to boot, with 1,686 rounds, giving us the ability to bring down most foes before we need to go for a reload. And we go for a reload here in preparation for the P-47D Thunderbolt coming immediately after us. We're going to break underneath them and force them to overshoot the target, because whilst they have the superior retention of their control surfaces in a high speed engagement, if this comes to a turn fight, whilst we have that rudder wobble, we will quickly gain the upper hand, especially seeing as our turn circle is much tighter than their own. They've overshot the mark, and now we just need to get a clean shot. And again, note how I'm having to fight the rudder in order to initiate manoeuvres or switch manoeuvres up on the fly, but eventually we will bring down our foe. It's just going to take some time compared to what we may want it to take. Now the P-47D here is using their roll rate retention in a high speed dive to their advantage, and you'll see that I'm losing ground on the engagement, because I do not want to build up too much speed when following them, otherwise I'm going to start to really experience that roll rate lockup. Now here they continue to use their roll rate and we almost get clipped by a friendly. You could say 2 to tango, so I almost clip them as well. But we're going to stay in the fight for now and continue to follow our opponent, with a friendly TPD by looks of things also getting involved. It's always good to see bombers taking revenge on enemy fighters and interceptors. But we finally bring down the P-47D here, picking up the critical at first, and then picking up the kill by taking off one of their wings. That's our 4th kill in the bag. Now we'll break away. As we break away, we can see that we're going for a reload once again, and typically reloads are going to be infrequent. You can bring down multiple foes so long as you are accurate with your fire. You can bring down say 5 or 6 foes because you do not need too much ammunition. A 1 to 2 second burst will normally do it before you need to go for that reload. And then again, reloads are going to be rather quick and painless simply because you're fielding heavy machine guns and not 20mm cannon, unlike planes such as the MS-410 and the Yak-1. Now, having gone through that fight, let's come back to the concept of energy retention, because we did mention in the first gameplay about our vertical energy retention. We said that it was not too great, and let's put some numbers on that. Using a 30-degree return angle for a boom and zoom attack, what you will find is that if you go from a starting altitude of say 3,000 meters, you can dive down at 1,300 meters and then go into your return climb at 30 degrees, and using engine power alone, you'll be able to retain all the energy you started off with, i.e. you'll level out at the same speed and at 3,000 meters altitude once again. If you will use war emergency power, you add that into the mix. The limit's not kicked up too much, it only goes up to 1,500 meters, which actually goes to address the fact that the war emergency power on this plane is not as strong as perhaps one would favour. And you're actually more reliant on using your war emergency power to help you accelerate in a straight line, and using your war engine power in order to go into those dives and boom and zoom attacks. So it's a mix up on the plane, in that you should not expect war emergency power to deliver everything for you, and that's something that I would apply in general to all aircraft in War Thunder Arcade, not just the P-40F-10, but you can really feel that coming through in the case of this aircraft, as we now chase down the BR-20. As we go into pursuit, let's talk about the other aspects of energy retention. In a straight line, what you'll find is when coming out of a high speed dive, you'll be able to retain your speed rather well, retaining it in the region of 540 km an hour. And as for your horizontal energy retention, so when going into a turn fight, it's good in general in the fact that you will gradually bleed speed in a dedicated thermal combat flaps until you hit 305 km an hour. But the issue is because of the rudder wobble, particularly if you've got a series of manoeuvres going on in the turn fight, then that will bleed the speed beyond this 305 km an hour limit. And if you're going to be using your rudder significantly in the midst of an engagement, you'll find that you'll bleed a lot of energy very quickly to the point that you can start to stall out very quickly. And this can catch you by surprise, particularly when going up against planes which have low stall speeds, such as the Hurricane Mark 1 Late, and the ability to maintain their controllability down to speeds below 225 km an hour, where in the case of this plane, you'll find that below 250 km an hour, you'll really start to suffer, and because your rudder wobble becomes so prominent, you'll find that this plane is actually starting to experience stall-like characteristics, despite its stall speed being all the way in the region of 125 km an hour. And this is going to make life difficult and cause these planes to have the ability to use hammerheads against you, or alternatively just rudder turn over the top of you in those close range turn fights when they go to lower and lower speeds. Now, talking about ideal speed, I would personally argue that the ideal speed range for this aircraft is a rather limited one between 400 and 500 km an hour. Within this range, the rudder wobble is going to become less prominent or insignificant once you get above 450 km an hour, but above 500 km an hour you start to hit your high speed dive lockup tension thresholds, in that you do not have the ability to use your roll rate or your rudder as effectively once you go above 500 km an hour. So it's a rather tight area to play within, and you have to respect the characteristics of this plane, whether it be at low speed, medium speed or high speed, to get the most out of it. It's not a plane that has a template for dealing with every foe. Again, that's what makes it jack of all trades in my opinion. Having dealt with that B-18, we're now making our way towards the centre of the map once again to look for the next foes. Perhaps one action boom and zoom over the large cluster in the centre of the map, albeit we're going to have to keep in mind we'll need to linearise that boom and zoom in order to get the most out of this plane, or alternatively conduct it over shorter distances. With this P-40 coming up towards us as well, we're getting ready to cause them to stall out by climbing over the top of them. And this is a brilliant point to come on to the comparison of the P-40F-10 versus the P-40E-1. Now straight away, these planes are very similar to one another. It's hard to argue that one's better than the other, and I would not dare argue that. I would actually argue that one is the evolution of the other. The P-40F-10 is an evolution of the P-40E-1 in that you have switched your engine, as we cause the P-40E-1 there, to stall out for our 7th kill. Because you've switched from the Allison engine to the Merlin engine, you now have a greater amount of pace in the straight line, in that your acceleration thresholds have improved slightly. For reference, in the P-40E-1, you had decent acceleration up to 350 km an hour, and you had fast acceleration with more emergency power included up to 450 km an hour. So both thresholds in the case of the P-40F-10 have been kicked up by 25 km an hour. This means that in general the P-41 is slightly slower overall, but it's not too noticeable. Meanwhile, in terms of altitude limits, with the Merlin engine having the superior performance up higher, you'll find that your maximum altitude limit for your engine is 4,000 meters, where you'll start to experience that gradual drop of acceleration that increases considerably by the time you get to 4,500 meters. So, respectively, these two numbers have now increased by 500 meters in the case of that gradual acceleration drop off, and at 1,500 meters in the favour of the P-40F-10. The only other aspect is that your maximum dive speed, in the case of the F-10, 898 km an hour, in the case of the P-40E-1, 892 km an hour. There's not much within it, to be honest, and the dive speed accelerations are pretty much exactly the same. In terms of the maximum altitude for your control surfaces, again, 5,500 meters in the case of the F-10, 5,500 meters in the case of the E-1. No difference there. The only thing that's in the favour, I would argue, of the E1 is the fact that the plane does not suffer from considerable rudder wobble on its controls when it goes into the midst of a turn fight, whereas the F10 definitely does. You'll find there is a very minor wobble in the case of the E1, but it's not something you actually have to fight against, you just need to be aware of it, and it becomes more prominent as you go to lower and lower speeds and starts to have the same effect as with the F10, particularly below 250 km an hour. But it's to the point that you can actually choose to use your rudder as a means of turning the plane around much more comfortably in the case of the E1 than you can with the F10. So the trade-off in effect is that the E1 is the more sustainable turn fighter in the long term because you're not having to contest your rudder as much as with the F10, but in turn the F10 has the slightly improved pace and the slightly improved performance with increase in altitude. So if I was to say that one is going to favour a certain role, it's that the F10 is the better high altitude performer and therefore the better bomber interceptor or high altitude engagement aircraft, whereas the E1 is the more sustainable turn fighter. But there's so little in it, if you put the two planes against one another in a 1 versus 1, it will be an equal match until the turn fight goes on for such a long period of time that the F10 pilot is going to succumb to the weakness of their rudder wobble, whereas the E1 continues to fight, but then again it's going to experience the same rudder wobble once it goes below 250 km an hour, and that will hold both planes back. So it's going to be an engagement based over skill rather than which plane is better as such. And of course, with them both having the same firepower and the same amount of ammunition, you cannot say that one has the better damage output compared to the other. Now we went for a linearised boom and zoom there to demonstrate the fact that we had to try and mitigate the lock-up of our control surfaces at higher speeds by picking on foes who are not going to be aware of our incoming presence, and instead they're just going to be flying in relatively straight lines for us to pick them off, and we did so successfully. Now we're looking towards the RE-2000, but they seem to have multiple friendlies on them, so as a result we're not going to be able to bring them down, and we're just going to saunter over the ships for the time being, build up a little bit of altitude over time as well to get ourselves in a comfortable position to go against the next aggressors. We can see an A-36 and a Mk.Vb and also another RE-2000 all coming into the furball down there, with 3 of our friendlies going up against the RE-2000 right now, and we're going to get stuck in. There's also a lag 3 coming in, and we're going to conduct boom and zoom once again. But are there any other items to note as this gameplay gradually comes towards its end? We talked about all the energy retention, we talked about the comparison to the P-40F-10, and really it's just to reinforce the fact that once again, the F-10 is one of those planes that is going to feel comfortable over time, and that's something I should stress. If you try to fly this plane and immediately think it's going to be suited to a single role, you're going to get frustrated, as I did when I initially flew this. You need to be able to adapt your performance in this plane to what you're going up against and the situations over time. There we went in with too much speed against the A-36, we lost the ability to pinpoint our shots onto the target, meaning we picked up a critical rather than taking them out of the game. Of course they're crippled to the point they're not going to be that combat competitive anymore, but that's the difference between picking up assists and picking up kills, and that's the main thing you need to get used to in this aircraft as the game comes to its end and it's time to take a look at another set of post-game stats. So with our 10 kills we're able to pick up 31,702 silver lions and 4,110 research points. Again, like in the first gameplay, we're not specific in our usage of the P-40F-10 and we adapted our application of the aircraft to the situations on hand. This time leaning more towards bomber interception with the occasional turnfight either with the P-47D Thunderbolt and then switching into boom and zoom as the number of enemy bombers up on high in the sky started to fade. But we can never say that this plane was applied in a single row of the game, we adapted to the circumstances at hand. When facing the P-40F-10 Warhawk in a one-on-one engagement, it's difficult to recommend a single approach to defeating this aircraft due to its jack-of-all-trades nature. This makes each engagement situational, with planes such as the Spitfire Mk.Vb and Ki-61 Mk. Co preferring to turn fight with the P-40F-10, whereas planes such as the Messerschmitt 19 ML3 and the VG-33C1 will experience greater success through using a superior climb rate to strike the P-40F-10 from above using boom and zoom tactics. However, there is one core weakness to this aircraft which can be exploited by all it engages, this being its unstable rudder. If you find yourself caught in a turn fight with the P-40F-10, your aim should be to reduce the speed of the engagement to below 250 km/h to exacerbate the wobble on the plane's rudder. Whilst you may find your own plane struggling with its controls at such low speeds as well, for example the MiG-334, the P-40F-10's pilot will normally be the first to succumb to losing control of their aircraft, having to level out or go nose down in order to build up speed and regain control. This will provide you with the opportunity to latch onto the plane's 6 and bring it down. Additionally, if you make the turn fight a series of quick fire manoeuvres, for example horizontal scissors, this will play against the P-40F-10's rudder as well, in that below 450 km/h their pilot will have to fight against the rudder wobble every time they proceed to make a manoeuvre. The net cost of this is that each manoeuvre will take slightly longer for the P-40F-10 and bleed slightly more energy, gradually conferring the advantage to you. To wrap up, let's first recap the strengths and weaknesses of the P-40F-10 Warhawk. Its main strengths are: number 1. Ample firepower. The 6 12.7mm M2 Browning machine guns on the P-40F-10 will bring down most opposition with an accurate 1 to 2 second burst. With 1,686 rounds of ammunition available, reloads are not going to come immediately, unlike those at your battle rating who field singular 20mm cannon with limited ammo, such as the MS-410. Number 2. Sensor pace. Whilst not the fastest at its battle rating, the P-40F-10's decent straight line acceleration, good dive speed acceleration and high maximum dive speed all combine together to give this plane the ability to make its way around the battlefield quickly as it seeks the next engagement. And number 3. Altitude independence. With its engine and control surfaces only hitting altitude performance limits at 4,500 metres and 5,500 metres respectively, the P-40F-10 will maintain its performance within the typical altitude ranges engagements occur at for its battle rating. As for its key weaknesses, number 1. Linearised boom and zoom. With both the P-40F-10's ailerons and rudder losing 75% of their performance in a dive at 725 km/h, you're encouraged to conduct your boom and zoom strikes over short distances, otherwise you can very easily miss your target if they take evasive action. And number 2, unstable rudder. With the P-40F-10's rudder wobbling whenever you conduct turns below a speed of 450 km/h, and this wobble only worsening with decreasing speed, you'll find yourself fighting against the aircraft to get guns on target. This will cost both time and energy, which can really put you at a disadvantage in extended engagements. As for my final opinion of the aircraft, the P-40F-10 continues the Jack of all trades fighter theme from the preceding P-40E-1. With the two aircraft being very similar in performance, the F-10 trades rudder stability and longevity in a turn fight for a slight increase in overall pace and maximum altitude limit. Therefore, for those who did not enjoy the P-40E-1, the F-10 offers minor change. However, for those who are fans of the P-40 family, it is time to say goodbye Allison, hello Merlin. With that is all I've got time for today. For my next review in 2 weeks' time, i.e. Sunday the 30th of December 2018, I intend to review either number 1, the Spitfire Mk.Vb, the Tier 3 battle rating 4.0 British fighter, or number 2, the A6M3 Mod 22 Co, the Tier 3 battle rating 4.3 Japanese fighter. Which of these two aircraft I review is entirely up to you. You can cast your vote by using the hyperlink in the description of this video. Polling will close at 1200 hours GMT on Sunday the 23rd of December 2018. But as always, I've been TX141. If you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. And until next time ladies and gentlemen, as always, take care and good luck in the skies.